listening to VHC, Vibes, History, and Culture, a show where we explore the unknown and little-known facts and gems about music and popular culture from a millennial lens. This is your host, Kevin Washington, and on this episode, this is our part 2 of our Justice for Disco, and this part is a continuation of where part 1 left off, or it's more of an extension to explore and discuss the evolution of the disco genre from the night it supposedly died on the field of Comiskey Park in Chicago back in 1979, to going back to the underground, evolving into other genres we see today, like dance house, pop, contemporary R&B and soul, and most of all, hip-hop. And like I said at the end of part 1, I was going to bring in a voice to discuss the topic of the evolution of disco and in modern day music other than my own. I had a chance to chat with Mikki Thee Boddie, host of the web series Feed the Body, about the impact of disco to modern day music, especially in hip hop, since this year marks the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So let's get into it. Here's the conversation with Mikki about the evolution of the disco genre and the impact on music today.
Don't understand is that hip hop was such a natural progression from disco, because you have to look at how each generation of music affected the genre of music.
Right.
So it's like, we went from, if you want to take it all the way back, we went from hymns, we went from more spiritual soul-based music to which naturally led us into gospel, which naturally led us into like gospel and like blues offshoot at the same time. Then you've got jazz, you've got all kinds of things that come rolling after that. Then you get to the rock and roll, and then we feed into disco, which is super fun, but it's a natural progression from disco to hip hop.
Absolutely.
Because their parents were disco. So their musical influence was disco, but that's what happens. You make it your own, and it became a voice of that generation.
Yeah.
Just like all the kids now are sampling our good old 90s R&B and hip hop.
Absolutely. I mean,
and creating something new.
Absolutely. And I also included in episode 4 about the music festivals like Coachella, for example.
Yes.
That was birthed out of the disco clubs.
Yeah, I was at Bonnaroo last year. Yeah, I was at Bonnaroo last year. And it's like, you had Stevie Nicks, you had but you also had, I think Nas was there. So it's like, I love that each generation gets to pull so heavily from such a rich history of music. And so disco was so much fun, and disco was such a free era. It only makes sense. It only makes sense that it inspired hip hop.
Absolutely, as well as dance and modern day R&B too. And pop.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't have modern day R&B without Donna Summer.
Exactly. and the thing that always interests me is the fact that Diana started with Motown.
It makes sense though. Yeah. It makes sense though, especially when we look back at our key and primary R&B artists. Come on, Whitney. Everybody was in the church. everybody sang in the church first.
Absolutely.
Our most iconic voices were in churches first.
Aretha,
and yes, I left it at Whitney because I'm a huge Whitney fan, and I think she just personifies the example. I ain't need to list nobody else.
Aretha too. I will put though that.
Yeah. You know what? Yes, I can't be disrespectful. I cannot be disrespectful. I won't do it. I won't do it.
All right.
But yeah, like, you wouldn't have hip hop without disco, because disco gave freedom, and with freedom comes revolution. When we feel free, we speak. Yeah. When we feel free, we grab life by the horns and try to make it our own. And that's what hip hop is. It's our stories on our terms.
Absolutely.
And also, you wouldn't have some of your best producers without disco, because you have to go in the crates. Come on. And what was on vinyl?
I mean, disco literally birthed what we call today as the modern day DJ.
You had record scratching, and it's such a crazy flow, because when you go from disco to hip hop, you have that nice little rock and roll, pop, R&B era going on in the 80s too. That was still heavily influenced by disco, because most of those major pop stars in the 80s were coming out of disco.
And to add, Niles Rodgers, who's part of the group Chic, he was behind a lot of people like Duran Duran and Madonna. I mean, look at Madonna's sound in the 80s. I mean, that is nothing but disco. And especially the fact that it was Niles Rodgers who was behind her music, producing and
now listen, old school Madonna, what's our language on here?
Do what you feel.
Okay, you know what? Old school Madonna I fuck with. This new Madonna, I don't know. Her antics. It's the antics, but we're not going to get into that. But like, you voguing. Like the passion and the freedom, the passion and freedom of disco is what birthed hip hop. It just did.
Absolutely.
During this part of the conversation, I talked with Mikki, who's a Chicago native, about how Vince Lawrence, one of the pioneers of dancehall music and others in the dancehall genre, impacted hip-hop thanks to the influence of disco.
Ironic and sort of sweet irony to see him, because he was there that night at the disco demolition. He was like 14. He was working as a usher, and he remembers seeing them bringing not quote unquote disco records. They were just bringing in black records, R&B records that weren't classified as disco. So give me your thoughts on that, being a Chicagoan, and how house music,
I think when we look at it, house music is a natural offshoot. Like, it makes sense that they were happening at around the same times. Again, it draws back to that it's an almost primal freedom. And I kind of hate to say that that way, but it is. It's you at your core, at your essence. There was a freedom. People were striving for something. People were moving for something. And that freedom came out in the type of music we wanted to hear, the type of environments we wanted to be in. And it was literally like, at times you would feel like it's the heartbeat. Like, it's literally the heartbeat of the culture. And disco and house, they just pump through you. And it's just this, I can do anything. Like, here's the thing. I'm Every Woman is a classic. because it gives anyone, anywhere, that feeling. Okay? I don't care where you fall on what spectrum. Okay? I don't care. Life is a spectrum. I don't care where you fall. You're a human being, and I'm every woman. You want to jam out.
Yeah.
Well, come on now. You feel good listening to it. At the very least, you feel good listening to it. And it's so natural that you had artists like Kanye West, who were so heavily influenced by Chicago house, feed that and merge that into hip hop and say, we can use disco beats. We can have this influence of house music and really have that bass thumping. And also we can have something the fuck to say.
Yeah.
Disco told you could open your mouth. Hip hop is what you said.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that. Disco gave us permission to speak, and hip hop is like, we're gonna say something, we're gonna do it, we're gonna put it in action. You know, it's like
who do you think raised Ice Cube, Eazy-E? Like,
right.
Who do you think raised NWA? Disco fucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those kids, they were in the house with disco, gospel, blues, jazz, all of those influences. It's a stair step. They're building blocks. And disco said, you can do it.
Absolutely.
You can do it. Raise your voice a little.
Absolutely. It gave
Don't
us
be scared.
It gave us people of freedom, especially Black women. And I also made a point to highlight that in episode 4. I talked about, of course, Anita Ward, LaBelle, the group LaBelle, and of course Gloria Gaynor, and of course the Queen Donna Summers. All of those women. I mean, we wouldn't have a Lizzo or a Beyonce or a TLC without those ladies.
I will also contest to say that we wouldn't have had Tina as we had her if it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's like, then you look at the influences that Tina had. I mean, that woman was a pioneer.
Absolutely.
And you can hear her sound and see her influence all throughout. I mean, Beyonce just did a tribute, and Beyonce was like, Tina is one of the artists I modeled myself after. So it's like, yes, those disco influences are going to be pulled in because look who raised them.
Absolutely.
Like, my daughter will have an understanding of 90s R&B because that's what her mother, who was raised on 90s R&B, listened to. She has her stuff, but she'll always skip back a few and be like, I remember listening to this with my mom. And those influences will always be in their taste. It's going to be in there somewhere. And so it's going to come out in how people express themselves. Like, we're getting back, even in other mediums of art, we're getting back to graffiti art.
Yeah.
I think it's Luminous Lane in Charlotte. It's in Uptown.
Okay.
It's literally the side of a parking garage and the back of some office buildings, but they let artists go wild. And it is beautiful. Like, it's beautiful.
Wow.
As we wrapped up our conversation, we talked about music today and the disco genre's recognition concerning the impact in today's music. I'm
obsessed with it because of the instrumentation, because I'm a music instrumentation nerd. The horns.
The way
and
they blend instruments. What?
Yeah.
Okay. I love horns. I will listen for horns all day. Horns and piano, I think. No, I do. I just love all of them. Because like as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I do fuck with a violin. I do. But the way that they were able to blend it all together and make it make sense. Like, it really is no wonder that it is in the foundation of hip hop.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, anything else you want to say about the disco, about the genre and its influence? What's the first thing that pops in your mind about it?
I mean, I think that right now people are putting a heavy emphasis on the disco influence. And a lot of people aren't realizing it was always there. Like, Absolutely. It was already there. I think people are just being more prominent about it. And I think we kind of need to accept it. Right. Because people are like, why are they doing this? And it's like, no, like, we need to accept that it's happening because it's a natural progression, because it was in our music. Like, the kids now are pulling from folks like Kanye West, who has sampled Donna Summer. So, like, come on now. They're going to pull from their greats, who pulled from their greats, who pulled from theirs. So it makes sense that it's here. Accept it and do your thing with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes you just got to go with the flow, especially when it's this fun.
Exactly. So to repeat the message that Vince Lawrence said, disco didn't die. It just rebirthed, and it continues to rebirth.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like what people think about with their children, right? They're supposed to be you 2.0, but better. Right. You're supposed to do it better every time, right? But everyone also has to do it their own way. That's all this is. Learn to have fun in it. Learn to see the good in it. Learn to see the beauty in the evolution.
And as we wrap up this episode of VHC, just wanted to thank you again for tuning in to the podcast, or whenever you're listening to the podcast. Thank you so much again. So grateful to you. But also a big thank you to Mikki Thee Boddie for such a great conversation about the evolution of disco and modern music. You can check her out on her web series on YouTube called Feed the Body. Also follow her on Instagram at Mikki Thee Boddie. And as the month of June closes, we got more VHC coming up in July, including conversations about Charlotte's Fab Fest. That's going to be a great conversation, and we'll have more details about that. And you can catch the podcast on Spotify, of course, and Buzzsprout. Also on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. You can reach out to me via email, kevwash, all lowercase, KEVWASH46 at yahoo.com. Also on social media on Twitter at KevinWash08 and Instagram Kevin_Washington_887. And also check out VHC's Facebook page as well. Thanks so much for listening, and peace out.